Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. I'm Samia Aziz, celebrating the power of literature and the voices of authors and changemakers from the global majority. Join me as we explore the stories that inspire, connect, and transform our world. Let's uncover the stories that truly matter together. This week, I'm super excited to be welcoming back one of my favourite guests, Huda Fahmy. Huda is a seriously talented writer and artist using comic-style storytelling to explore wider, serious issues pertaining to identity, current affairs, faith, mental health, being a visibly Muslim person in the States, growing up, and so much more. She explores these issues through comedy and in a light-hearted way, while both resonating with those also sharing these experiences and offering some insight to those who don't. Huda Fahmy is now back with a hilarious and poignant follow-up in her Huda F series, Huda F Wants to Know. In this book, the character of Huda's life and worldview are turned upside down when her parents announce they're divorcing, and Huda grapples with the change. She's ready for junior year. She's got a plan to join all the clubs, volunteer everywhere, ace the ACTs, write the most awe-inspiring essay for her scholarship applications. Easy. But then Mama and Baba announced the most unthinkable news. They're getting a divorce. Huda is devastated. She worries about what this will mean for her family, their place in the Muslim community, and her future. Her grades start tanking. She has a big fight with her best friend, and everything feels out of control. Will her life ever feel normal again? Huda F wants to know. Huda Fahmy grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, and has loved comics since she was a kid. She attended the University of Michigan, where she majored in English. She taught English to middle and high schoolers for 8 years before she started writing about her experiences as a visibly Muslim woman in America, and was encouraged by her older sister to turn these stories into comics. Huda, her husband Jihad, and their children reside in Houston, Texas. I'm so glad she's my guest today. Huda, assalamu alaikum. Welcome, welcome back to the Diverse Bookshelf. It's so wonderful to have you on the show again. How are you doing?
Hey, walaikum assalam. I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me again. I jumped when they told me, they want to have you back. I was like, yes, I'd love to. So thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. I love speaking to you, and it's been about 2 years, I think, since we last spoke. I love speaking to you then, and I'm so excited for this conversation now. And it has been 2 years, and obviously we have the next book in your Huda F series, which is now is coming out very shortly. Huda F Wants to Know, but tell me a little bit about what you've been up to over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so I think I spoke to you when Huda FRU came out, and between that, I had my follow-up, Huda F Cares, and that was a National Book Award finalist. So that was a huge accomplishment for me. I had not really even set my sights on something so prestigious. So for it to have made it to the finalist position was huge. And then last year, I got to actually be a judge for the National Book Awards, and that was a really cool switch up of the roles. And it was really nice because I had just turned in my manuscript and my art and all the work I needed to get done for Huda F Wants to Know. And so I got to take a break last year. I want to say break, but I was reading like a bunch of books, but it felt like a nice break for once. Like I just get to relax a little bit and read these books. And so waiting in anticipation for Who to F Wants to Know. So I know you mentioned earlier, I think that you'd read it, and I haven't really talked to a lot of people who have read it. So I'm very excited to hear about what you think, but I'm also excited to talk about it. So that's kind of like, I'm just been taking it day by day. I also had my second son, I think, since we last spoke. I had my child when Huda F Cares came out, and he's 3 now. So that's been fun. Being a mother of 2, also big responsibility, but a lot of fun.
Oh, lots of change, but it sounds like a really full-on couple of years that you've had. And sort of before we get into the book, and I did read it and I did love it, so I can't wait to talk about it. But I know also, like, obviously over the last year, 15, 16 months, as everything that we've been witnessing happening in Gaza and around the world, it's been like a really dark and difficult time. And you've spoken really openly on your platform about the struggles you've had to process what's going on, and I think so many people have been in a very similar boat. Um, but so much of your work is centered around lightheartedness and comedy and jokes. Um, but I think that, and obviously, like, life is difficult anyway, and there's always challenges, but I feel like it must just be such a stark comparison to the grief and the pain and the suffering. How have you sort of been straddling?
So when you mention it, I have to disassociate. Like if like I
Mm,
went into this, getting ready to do this podcast, and if I don't to do what I need to get done,
mm,
I will literally spend, which I did for the first 6 or 7 months. I was unable to, like, I for that part as well, that I was happy that I had these books that I was reading last year, because I could not get up, like, to do anything else.
mm,
I would not have been able to do anything else. It's it and I don't wanna even, what I'm going through just watching it is obviously nothing compared to them actually experiencing. And I try to, whatever what role I can play, what talent that I have, what skill that I have, what platform that I have, if I can put it towards bringing awareness, raising funds, um, calling to action, if I can do that, that's absolutely what I'm going to do. And then I didn't even realize that I was disassociating, because it just really it was like, "Oh god, I have to bring back," and I have to mask up, like, it sucks, like, it's something
mm,
that when I have to go into doing, because I still have to go and do author visits, and I still have to talk to readers, and I end up having to, almost as if I'm living 2 different lives, because that's sometimes what it feels like. It feels like we're in with some people who don't even realize what's happening or what's going on, and how much it's really affecting so many facets of our lives. It's like we're living in two separate worlds and two separate realities than some people. And so for some of us, when we have to get up and we have to get our work done, we do have to um, we do have to take that breath and realize that if we don't get to do if we don't work, if we don't organize, it'll just end up feel crushed by the overwhelming guilt, by the overwhelming, like, hopelessness sometimes, and we're not able to work. So we really have to make sure that we don't let that stop us from working and getting the work done. But yeah, a lot for just the images and the stories. I have family that travels there to do medical work, so they were there, so we're getting real time, even
mm.
more inside, like, eyes on the ground, seeing what's actually happening. We don't even know what the full scale of it is. So having to transfer from that, like going, experiencing that and living that, and that is a reality of, something that we have to go through and experience. Going from that to now I have to write this comic, and and I have to, it's like, this is, I'm now writing and drawing, what I'm drawing and writing about is also heavy. It takes, a big toll. So I always, like, my work is known for taking heavier topics and talking about them in more lighthearted ways. And in this particular one, it's divorce and mental health. And it just so happened that I was like, I you're experiencing a lot of trauma, and a lot of, you just feel unable to do things. So writing it at the same time, um, was was a difficult aspect of this particular story, to find the humor in it when nothing seemed funny at all at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just as like someone that like, knows what you do and has like followed your work and has continued to follow your work even throughout this time, I can only imagine like how difficult it is to have to also show up for something that demands of you to be lighthearted and joyful when you don't feel that way. And I'm so glad that you were just so upfront with saying that, instead of giving us a, well, you can find the joy in everything, and there's always a silver lining, and sometimes you have to dig deep, and those things are true. And I
Yeah.
think,
And I
you know,
do remember, I think I did post something like that once or twice,
yeah,
but because I was more for myself, to try to get myself out. I dug such a dark pit, and I had to remind myself it's okay to celebrate the joys as well, and there's
yeah,
resistance in our joy. But yes, I couldn't do that all the time. It was so. much, and
Mm.
it was just I couldn't laugh. I couldn't find things funny. It really was a complete mind shift. Um,
Yeah.
People follow you and read your work because you're funny, because that's what they were attracted to begin with, which is also in itself a trauma response to a
Yeah,
lot of the
absolutely.
difficulties that we go through. To have to shift and be like, I think I need to actually confront, or sit with these emotions and sit with the grief instead of laughing at it, which is, again, is not a wrong way to manage grief. But I had been laughing at my problems for so long, and this was so on the scale of what my problems are compared to what they were going
Mhm.
through and they are going through. I had to sit with that grief, and yeah, and I didn't feel like laughing
Yeah.
for a really
No,
long
and I
time.
think, a lot of us over the last year and a half have, I guess, like, have felt the need to try and still be joyous and happy and calm and everything, and in one part of our lives, while also keeping ourselves informed and doing the work that we need to do.
Yeah,
And sometimes then what that means is you're actually denying yourself the ability to sit with either of those things, because you don't when we're not sitting for long enough or for deep enough to process actually. And I'm so glad for this reminder right now, which is it's okay when things are that bad for you just to accept that and to lean into that and to sit with that as well. And I think also it's important in some ways. If you're feeling grief, you need to experience it, but also, just I think fundamentally, like, being empathetic on any level, feeling pain for others or for the world around us is a really important and beautiful thing to do, because when that stops, I think that's when the worst things happen around the world. And I feel like it's the empathy that people have, and the sense of justice that has been keeping so many of us on the
yeah,
streets for over a year. And without that, it feels unbearable to think that, like, we could live in a world where we didn't have any of that. So yeah,
yeah,
thank you for sharing that, because I know it's not easy. And also, huge kudos for still sometimes when you've needed to show up, even if that means to put on a mask or to conceal or to disassociate.
well, I hope it also is to show up, to bring attention to it, to show up and
Yeah.
realize I do have this ability and this platform and this opportunity, and I can't just spiral. I need to get out of this. I need to get out of this pit, and I need to use what I can, whatever I'm able to do.
Mm.
I need to push forth and talk about it and use the platform that I was given. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, but it did take a while to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and like you said, like, you've also written "Huda F Wants to Know," which is, I mean, you've written about another heavy and serious topic, and I think especially for yourself. I mean, I only realized in the sort of the thanks in the book at the end, where actually you're also writing from somewhat lived experience, because you're writing about divorce. And you
Yeah,
do it so in just in Huda fashion, like, so beautifully and gently, and and like comically where needed. Um, but you're talking about, obviously, about divorce, and Huda and her sisters learn that their parents are getting a divorce. And there's a moment when in the beginning, when their mother tells them that they're going to have a family meeting, and they start thinking, like, oh, maybe we're going to get a car, or maybe we're doing this, maybe we're doing that, and then it turns out to be something that wasn't even on their radar, until when they some of the sisters are having a little bit more introspective and thinking about, okay, well, maybe this is, maybe we did see it coming, and all of those things. But divorce is one of those things that I feel like, you know I feel like a little bit we're seeing a little bit more, I guess, acceptance of it, or like celebration of it. Sometimes I know a lot of people now, a lot of women decide to throw themselves at a divorce party once they once they divorce. And I think it's interesting and sometimes really wonderful if you're celebrating the end of a relationship that was not serving you for whatever reason. But it is still largely unspoken about. And I think not only is it unspoken about, but the depth of understanding what happens or what goes into it, or all of those things is still not really there. What do you think it is about divorce that makes it such a almost like a taboo subject in around the world, really?
I can't speak about around the world except for in our Muslim community. I just remember growing up, and it was anytime I went to, I was younger, but I was still attending these conferences that were probably for older people who were actually married, but they were always talking about how divorce was the very last straw, and you don't want to get a divorce, and even though Allah made it easy, like you shouldn't, like it's that's how in Islam, you remember the like how what makes Shaitan the happiest, Satan the devil, whatever happiest, is when he breaks up a couple. And so don't fall, and so it was like framed as like you're falling into the devil's hands if you get a divorce, and you're like, oh no, I can't get a divorce. And anyone who had a divorce was looked at as, oh, they didn't try hard enough. They, what were they doing? They're broken. Something's wrong with them, and it was just as if like you were a failure. And it was like for the couple, like the couple has failed, and they're just looked upon. And it's always, of course, worse for the woman. She failed the family, and it was always so much worse. And of course, this is cultural, and we know that. But I'm saying it for the listeners out there. It's just very, very cultural. And so growing up, like knowing that it just wasn't talked about because they didn't want to normalize it, because they didn't want to. But of course, this doesn't take into account people who are in horrible situations, people who are in very dangerous situations, and marriage is not meant to be like that. And so
Mm.
it made it very difficult for these women, and sometimes men, who are in these dangerous situations and they need to leave. And it's very difficult to they make sometimes, unfortunately, they make it really hard to get a divorce. So I wanted to talk about it because I've always gotten people who were non-Muslim who didn't even know that Muslims were allowed to divorce, or didn't know what the process was of divorce. And I guess there are some religions where divorce is not allowed. I know in the Christian faith, before the whole Church of England and whatever, that wasn't allowed. And so I can understand where that idea might have come from. If they don't have any knowledge of the Muslim faith, is divorce something that's allowed? So I knew I wanted to address that, and I wanted to talk about it more from the children's point of view, because it doesn't matter why the parents are getting divorced. I don't really delve into the why, although you can probably from context clues just kind of gather that they've just drifted apart. Really, don't really know why, and I didn't want to mention why, because it doesn't matter why, because it's not from their point of view. It's from the kids and the way that they're dealing with it. And Huda tends to spiral, and she's going through this very isolating herself, depressive period, and not really knowing. And she feels very selfish, because how is it going to affect me? What's going to happen to my life? At the same time, she feels broken up about the fact that her family's breaking up, and conflicted because her family's always stressed bond and being a family, and strengthening their bond as a family. And so she's so confused, and she kind of goes through these steps of like grief that people who are experiencing loss go through. And I wanted to tackle it from that point of view, because it was I felt like that was how I kind of it took me years, but I went through each of those steps as I experienced my parents' divorce. And I went through denial, and I went through anger, and I finally, to the point of accepting it and understanding it. And it was a long journey and a long process that I had to like shorten for Huda in this book, because we need closure and stuff. um but that's kind of why I felt like it was a really important next step for her. It was a topic that's not really talked a lot about, and in the Muslim community, and it's one that I know, like my parents are divorced in real life. My husband's parents are divorced. I have a sister who's divorced. It's just something that is prevalent in our, not prevalent, but it is something that happens in our community. We don't really talk about it, and we should talk about it. We're not encouraging it,
Mm.
and there are steps to take. Obviously, if you're in that situation where you want to talk it out, and go to counseling if you need to. But it's more about when this happens, your kids are affected in a way that the person who's experiencing the divorce, the adults, the married couple, are having their own dynamic, but we don't rarely really get to see what the kids are experiencing. Growing up, it was like, you'll be fine. This is not about you. This is about us. You'll be fine. But I wasn't fine, and my sisters weren't fine. And and so I wanted to make sure that that was also discussed.
Yeah. And I know that I mean, your primary reason for not really delving into the cause or like the root of the divorce was because it was about Huda and it was about her sisters. But I also really just like that because it's actually never anyone's business why two people are getting a divorce. And I feel like it's so there's like if somebody tells another person that they're divorced, usually the next question is like, "Oh, but why?" But actually, it's got nothing to do with people. When you marry somebody or you tell somebody, "Oh, I'm married" or "I'm getting married," nobody asks straight away like, "Oh, why? Why are you getting married?" Like it's not a thing. But it seems like
How
with
did you
with
meet? What?
exactly with divorce, it seems that people feel somewhat entitled, like they need to understand the full picture. But actually, like, you know, that the only people that really are ever going to fully understand why they're getting divorced are the people getting divorced. And there's such an
Yeah.
expectation, I think, that like, oh, but we want to understand what happened, what went wrong, and all this. And it's not kind. Yeah.
It might come from a place of like, I don't want to make a mistake. Like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
What mistakes did you make? And it's like, this is not a
Exactly.
blame
Yeah.
game here right now. I mean, there are some black and white cases. Yes, I'm not talking about those, but there's very much like, well, what did you do though? Did you do anything? And you start immediately like, I'm not going to tell you why, because then you're going to start, well, why didn't you try this? And why didn't you try that? And
Yeah.
then you trying to like
Yeah.
defend yourself and you feel like you're in that position where you have to explain yourself. And it's much easier to be like, it is not this.
Exactly, because it feels like people are searching to hear like, okay, it makes sense to me because it got that bad. Like they're waiting to hear like, a buzzword like, oh, there was some abuse, or he cheated, or she cheated, or whatever. They're waiting to hear something that in their head justifies it. When actually, really, people get divorced for a whole host of reasons, and there are some people that are very open about their marriages that haven't worked out, and sometimes it just from the little that they do share, what comes across is just how complex it is when two people have been together for a significant period of time and how much they change and how much life changes and things come your way that you had no idea was coming. But and so I appreciate that actually we didn't delve into that because as readers we don't need to know, or anyone doesn't need to know, but also obviously because it was from
Anybody that reads the books knows that they were young when they got married. They got married very quickly. I mean, that's
mm,
pretty much, and you can come up like there's a multitude of things that could have happened. I also had to respect my mother and father because
yeah,
this is a semi autobiographical, and I didn't want to just like tell their story when it's not my job to tell. Like that's for them to
yeah.
talk about, and I know I don't want to put them in that position where they feel uncomfortable, where people are asking them questions. So that was another, I had to be aware of that, and it was just another trying to be considerate of their personal stories as well.
Yeah. So one of the things around sort of how the kids are impacted that you do explore is how open or not the parents are to discussing what's going on. So, it seems like, fairly early on, like the parents are very sort of clear, like, we're going to make sure that you're not impacted, but this is what we've decided. And when they start to ask questions or they're probing,
Yeah,
especially their father sort of
yeah.
closes off, which is really sad to see, but I think very realistic, especially when it comes with such a huge topic like divorce. Parents don't know how to talk about it with their children. It's very difficult. How do you talk about
Nobody
adult
wants to come
issues
up
to
as the bad
children?
guy.
Exactly, yeah, but also like how do you
Yeah, well, nobody wants to. Yeah.
yeah exactly. um but obviously that causes frustration and concern and sadness and depression, and we see actually Huda and all of her sisters react very differently to that. um But what exactly in terms of that were you really hoping to bring out, the way that children respond?
I definitely wanted to show different reactions. Each of the sisters was kind of going through their own. One of them was totally like, I'm fine with it. Like, I did want them to go back, but now I'm like, you know what? Hey, it's totally fine. And another one is just angry all the time and angry because she wants to know why and or she knows why, but she wants more, explanation. She feels like she's earned it or deserves that explanation from her parents. And one of them just feels completely abandoned and betrayed, and And so it's to showcase that they're all very normal ways to react to the breaking of a family unit, or the separation of a family unit. What kids are most afraid of is this uncertainty of what's going to happen, and who am I gonna live with, and where am I gonna go, and sometimes the parents don't know these answers themselves, and so they don't answer at all, and it's sometimes very, very poorly handled, or without taking into account what the kids might react. But at the same time, I'm also hoping for, while the kids are, or while the young readers are seeing that they are allowed to go through this as well, not to forget that their parents are also experiencing and going through this really difficult time. And so it's parents have to juggle this. I'm what I'm going through, but I also have to make sure I'm responsible for my children and what they're feeling and experiencing. And sometimes that means putting their own frustrations on hold to make sure that they're taking care of their kids. And so their kids kind of realize, oh, like, I can definitely go through what I'm going through, but I'm at the same time, I have to be, cognizant that they're experiencing this for the first time as well. And it's, it's such a complicated, mixture of emotions and reactions and experiences, and really trying to work through it. I hope I was able to achieve at the end this idea that you might not find this closure immediately. Like it's something that you need to maybe talk to somebody, go to therapy for. You might need to talk more to your family. Don't close yourself off. Don't isolate yourself. You might not figure it out all right now, and that's okay. And it's life goes on, and you'll take it one day at a time and one step at a time. And that's, I hope that I was able to do that effectively. Sometimes I write and it's just me
Yeah,
processing my
absolutely.
own trauma, and it's just did I, like, oh, I'm supposed to actually write a story, but I'm like just using it like a diary or something. Oh man. But it brought up a lot. It brought up a lot of emotions, things that I haven't really unpacked even growing up, that I
I'm
to
sure.
feel
I'm
a lot
sure.
for a lot of things. So things happen that are heartbreaking, and I take it personally because what did I do wrong? And then I have to like write about it and talk about it,
Mm.
and it's and I know
Yeah.
I'm
Well, I mean, with the book, you definitely I feel like it was such a great exploration of doing it because we see Huda and we see her sisters as well all deal with it differently, but they're so vocal, at least internally, if not to other characters in the book. But really, those questions that they have, the fears that they have, the concerns and the uncertainty, like it's really clear, and we see a lot of especially like Huda's mom. I think she really comes through, like really, really comes through for her daughters throughout by the end anyway. And we see that, as you've said, like that there isn't a neat and shiny and tidy ending, because I guess when something like divorce happens, it's not something that has an end, right? It changes your
change.
life, and
Yeah.
with that, there's so many uncertainties and so much. Yeah, it's gonna just bring things onto a completely different path, and there's going to be different things that are going to happen, and potential different challenges and changes and all kinds of
It,
stuff. But I really, really appreciated the exploration of mental health throughout this book, and you do it in all of your work, but I feel like it was just so well done in this book. I feel like so many young readers will really, really resonate with it, and hopefully it will really help them, because we see Huda, not only is she like struggling and she's struggling to manage her emotions, but she pushes away her best friend. She's like having difficult conversations with her sisters. She also like loses it with her mom, and she says some really awful
terrible.
things to her
She's
mom.
horrible. I literally had to put the book down when I was reading.
I love that.
I was so scared writing it. Like my mom still hasn't read it, because it felt like I was such an angry, angsty teenager, and I had these full on shouting matches with my mom. God forgive me, and it was so hard to put myself back in there, because as a, alhamdulillah, fully formed brain, frontal lobe is good. I'm watching, and I have to like go back and really put myself in that in those shoes of young Huda, and I was just felt so terrible to my mom. At the same time, I remember asking her, begging her to let me go to therapy as a like as a teenager, begging her, and they would not put me in therapy because to them they're like, no, if you go to therapy it'll push you away from Islam. You won't be Muslim anymore. They're going to push you away. They're going to say that Islam is the problem, which if you think one person is going to tell me that, then you have a whole other problem. That's not the issue. Like, if you think one person is going to push me away from Islam, there's a bigger issue at play here that needs to be addressed. But
Mm.
it took years of self-reflection. I did end up eventually for myself paying for therapy when I got older, and very helpful, and just reading a lot more, and that was very much I feel like I did a lot of work that probably I did not have to do if I had gone to therapy a lot sooner. And I'm so grateful that my mom and dad both have changed
Mm.
since we've gotten older, and they do regret. They have like admitted, yes, I regret. My mom herself would never go to therapy, which we begged her to go herself to. We're like, Mama, please go to therapy. She would never.
Oh,
But she said, I wish I'd listened to you more, and given you that chance to go to therapy. So that's a good, I think, progress, for my mom that stepped with that.
yeah,
So alhamdulillah.
yeah. It's so, I mean, yeah, it's so, I guess it must be so, I guess somewhat strange for you to give Huda in your book the things that you didn't have when you were in her shoes when you were her age. And but I hope, as difficult and challenging that was, I wish that I know I hope that there was maybe some like healing through that as well, because at least you can identify also what you needed, but also understand better like why that wasn't given to you at that time. But and thankfully you've been able to access it later on in your life. But I just think it was such a you really explored it in such a wonderful way. And we saw Huda like not only have all these questions and have all these frustrations and all this sort of bent up anger, but she had very legitimate concerns about her own future. And we see like early on in the book, and we've seen it throughout all of the in the Huda F series, who does a little bit of a when it comes to her life, this sort of striving for perfectionism, this I must have a goal. All I know is like if I succeed in school, if I get the grades that I need to get, if I get to go to university, everything's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be okay. I know that this is what I need to do. And obviously, like throughout the book, we see that that is influenced and exacerbated by her situation with her parents getting divorced, but it was always there, right? So there's lots of things going on for her, and I feel like obviously the divorce has heightened all of the concerns that she's always had about her future. And I think that will also resonate with people like me. My parents are not divorced, but I know I still have that thinking today. If I do X, Y, and Z, everything is going to be fine. And it's this sort of, I don't know, like children of immigrant, like minority community, Muslim, like I don't know what it is, but like all of these experiences that have created this, how can we succeed? How can we survive in this world that, is constantly trying to push us down? And Huda is dealing with that alongside, okay, well, I had a plan, but now I feel like my plan is derailed because I've lost the stability of my family that she has frustrations with but loves dearly, and has worked, as you said, really hard to keep them as a unit. And yeah, so and as we mentioned, like Huda does go to therapy, although she is very herself reluctant also, but and so she's really surprised actually when the final push to get the support has come from her mother. And I know that you mentioned that your own mother, when you were growing up, was not supportive of therapy. And I think that things have changed because my parents were also the same and are a little bit different to that now. But what do you think it is about therapy that for so long has felt so alien to our communities?
I mean, I think it is the idea that anything can be solved with reading more Quran and doing more salah. Therapy to them was a sign of
Yeah.
weakness in your faith, which is not true. Uh, and it's like it was something that I think that they couldn't see physically as something that was wrong. Versus
Mhm.
like if you broke an arm or a leg and you can see the break, you can see the fracture, you can know that you can go to a doctor to fix that. But if it's something that is happening internally and it's a mental thing, then it's not real. Oh, you're either you have the wrong friends, you're reading the wrong books, you're not reading enough Quran, and they blame it on you, or they blame it on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And unfortunately they conflate that your mental health is connected to your religiosity, and it's not. And I think it's just not knowing enough about what, not we didn't have that education growing up, or the right words to put into it. And then I think they might have also taken it as, well, if it's not religion, then you're saying maybe I'm the problem, and they would start taking these things personally, as if it was an
Mm.
attack on them. And it's just, I think all of these things together, and us not having the words to be able to explain that it is not about you, like it is about me, and how I am having a difficult time dealing and working through these issues that I have. Because it's so easy for us to understand that, like, babies go through so many stages of development as they grow, that we are still in stages of development through high school, through college, like really up until maybe 24, 25. Our bodies are changing, our joints are changing, our brain is growing. Like, we are, so when a baby is fussy because they're going through developments, and we are all of a sudden angsty because we're also going through developments, it's hard for parents to like understand that, because you're like, you've been alive for 16, 17 years now. You should know how to solve these problems on your own. And it just becomes, this thing that no longer, okay, the kids no longer want to talk about how they feel, because they're constantly feeling like they have to defend or validate defend themselves without getting any
Mm.
validation from their parents. So alhamdulillah, I do feel like it has changed a lot in the past few years. I feel like young people have more access to the right kind of language to explain what's happening and what they're experiencing, so their parents can hopefully help them get the help, the aid and the therapy that they might need. I'm and not being, not connecting. Now we have more Muslim therapists as well, who are, being able to help
Yeah.
them understand these two things are separate. Like, they can, and then we can use, there's no saying that we can't use Islam to help us, work through our issues. There are so many ways, alhamdulillah, that our religion and our faith encourage us and help us make the right choices and get through these difficult times. And at the same time, we also use different methods to ground ourselves and to, talk it through, and alhamdulillah, that works as well. I really, I did have to, and I had to do, I did talk to a couple like mental health specialists and therapists and counselors to make sure that I was also talking about it in a way that was easy to understand, and also seems like it's that you're not, that it's there, like, or there's no way out. Sometimes kids feel like there's no way out, or nobody gets it, or nobody understands. So I hope that I addressed it in that way, where it was something that they could see, because she does spiral in the story. Hoda spirals, and she does make some bad choices or wrong choices, and her plan does kind of, she decides just not to care about anything, because why? And
Mm.
she just kind of throws her plan out the window for a little bit, and then she suddenly starts failing, and then wonders why is she failing at all these things. And spirals further and further down. And I think her biggest mistake was isolating herself, and that's one of the most dangerous things somebody who's experiencing a depressive episode can do, is isolate themselves, because they don't want to feel like a burden. They don't want to feel like they're taking up somebody else's time or energy, or emotions, and so they just kind of stay to themselves, and they just continue to, their biggest enemy, and they just continue talking really horribly to themselves. So um knowing that I went through that, alhamdulillah, I had good strong friends. My sisters also kind of noticed and were very good to make sure that they dragged me along everywhere they went, even if I didn't want to. I had a real, it saved me. So I wanted to make sure that I had this story for these kids also who might be experiencing that, to let them know they're not alone, and that they can find a way to work through their issues.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think that I felt most deeply while reading the book was that Huda has this quite almost like when she's at the peak of her spiral, where she has this sense of, am I being selfish? And it wasn't so much that she was blaming herself for her parents' divorce. And I think, that is probably credit to the story where her parents tried to really, really explain that this is not this is not because of you. So it's not so much that she's blaming herself for the divorce happening,
Yeah.
but she starts to feel guilty for all the negative things that she's feeling and thinking, because she's like desperate for her parents to stay together because she doesn't want to see her parents divorced, but she doesn't want all the uncertainty and the stress and the sadness that's going to come. And I think that that is so, like, such an important thing to explore in life in general. Like, when something bad happens to you, even if it is got to do with other people, where do you strike the balance between how you're
Mhm.
feeling and how you need to hold empathy for other people? But when you're a young person, that's
So
really difficult to navigate. I mean, it's difficult to navigate as like a fully developed adult, but as a young person, that's incredibly difficult because you're not prepared when you're young for things that could go wrong. I guess when you're an adult, you've had experience of things not working out. So when something big happens, you're a little bit more equipped to deal with it. But as a young person, as a child, that's really, really
yeah.
hard.
It,
What message would you like to give to young people that are struggling with that sense of, am I being selfish because I'm struggling so much with my parents' divorce?
that was actually a big point for me when I'd finished writing it and I read it over, and I really did not like the Huda character. Um, and I sometimes that happens. Sometimes you
Mm.
go back and read, and it's like your character has a whole personality that is not, she started off based on me, and she's like her own personality. But I did not like how I had written her so selfishly, and it just really did mirror that I was that selfish as a teenager when I was experiencing it, and I actually had to talk to, um I had to talk to a therapist about it, and I'm like, "Why is she so selfish?" And I was like, I don't want to erase what she's experiencing, but at the same time, she really doesn't look good coming out of this. Like, I felt shy about, like,
Mm.
having my character be so selfish, and it's like, because all she cares about is like, "Yeah, sure, it's so sad that you're getting a divorce, but how is it gonna affect me? I'm not gonna get married because, people are
Mm.
divorced relationships are so taboo in the community. What college am I gonna go to? Am I gonna move to go with dad or mom? Am I Is that gonna affect my college scholarship right
Mm.
now? Does that mean I'm not going to be able to, like, get my own car? Like, she's only thinking about herself at that time, which is it's like, it seems so selfish. And because you're right, she has to, like, at one point, she has to, on one hand, she has to understand that this is not about her. Her parents are experiencing this really, difficult moment in their lives where they have to decide to separate. And at the same time, she's like, well, I also have issues that you're now mucking up my whole life. And so it's a big, and so when I was talking to my therapist about this and asking her, like, is this, why is she like this? Or why is she doing this? Or is this bad? She said, this is, like, first of all, absolutely normal. Kids, especially at this age in high school, it is
Mm.
so normal to center whatever issue is happening on how it affects them, because it's almost like it's I don't want to say it's grounding, but it really is like the first thing that they're thinking of is, well, how is this going to affect me? I cannot control what you're doing, but I can, I'm looking at how I'm going to be affected by this. And so she said that this was an incredibly normal thing to do. A lot of kids do this whenever there's a big tragedy that happens. The uncertainty is less on, oh, I'm so sorry this bad thing is happening, and more on, how am I going to? And you're right, it's something that you kind of understand how to balance between, like, yes, I can hold space for how I'm feeling, and at the same time have this empathy for what they're experiencing and try to help them as well. And that's just something that, did not hit Huda for like immediately. Her first thought was a very selfish thought, and I wanted to normalize that, because sometimes we realize, as kids, they'll realize they might be acting in a selfish way, and then they might shut down because they're not holding any space for their
Mm.
emotions or what they're experiencing, because they feel so guilty about thinking only about how it affects them, when it's okay to do that. It's okay to think about how it's going to affect you, because there's that fear of uncertainty. There's that fear of not knowing just what's going to happen in your future. And then you can also at the same time understand that these people are also separate people. Your mom and dad exist outside of the frame of mom and dad, who are experiencing these difficulties and challenges. So I just wanted to normalize that feeling of selfishness is something that tends to, make kids not want to share what they're experiencing because they don't want to look bad. And that kind of is, just it's something that it makes you feel lonely. Like, you can't really talk about how you're feeling because you're really scared. But it's absolutely normal, and I don't want that to be something that is something that stands in their way from discussing how they're feeling, because they're afraid how they might look. um, to other people.
Yeah, because I guess like the other sort of side or the other like extreme of it is when young people or children don't sit with that emotion, don't validate it, don't feel it, don't
Yeah.
express it, and instead focus fully on this must be so hard for my parents and try to serve them. That does not serve you well at all, and that's really like almost really like harmful for then what will come up later in life, as we all know. So like that I think is that's what we want to avoid. We don't want, and we see it a little bit with one of the
Yeah.
sisters who becomes, fixated on like serving and looking after her mother. And that is like an extreme level, or like a really, some level, a really great level of empathy, to be able to be in this situation and your first thought is, oh my gosh, are my parents okay? But as a child, to also not sit with how that makes you feel and to address some of the concerns and the frustrations that you have, that is also harmful and dangerous. And so I'm glad that like, we're having this conversation that's like, well, that's not what we don't want to do. We don't want to do that. And actually it's okay. It's okay to feel, to be selfish in this moment, especially as a child, because we can't expect children to have the capacity to sort of handle both things, at least not straight away anyway. And even, like it's tough when they're little. Like you can't. I feel like it's so difficult to put
Yeah.
that on them, which is why it was so nice to see throughout the book. At least Huda's mum was so forthcoming with reminding her daughter that, look, this isn't about you, but like, I see what you're going through, and we're going to do everything we can to make it okay for you, because I think there's just, yeah, she was like really 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 stressed with that. But I think you've mentioned a lot about, this is based on your own experience, and it's been really triggering for you, and you've discussed elements of the story also while with your own therapist and stuff. But how did, I guess, you sort of stay calm, and how did you manage that? Because I'm sure it would have brought up some really difficult things for you, especially like you have mentioned that at the time that you were going through it, not only was it so difficult, but you had support from your friends and your sisters, but not any external support, and your parents were of a different mindset than they are now. So how have you sort of managed to deal with all the triggering aspects of what's come up?
I mean, as an adult now, just knowing that I can put space, I just take breaks. It's not a very it's not like a groundbreaking solution. It's knowing that I can take a break and just take a walk. I knowing where I am now, remembering how I was able to survive, and because I was honestly in a very dark place, and it was it stemmed from a lot of just it didn't start at the divorce, but there was a lot of just dark times that I had to experience and go through, and having to put myself back in that place mentally was not fun. And I didn't realize how hard it would be. I didn't think I'm oh, the happy one, I'm the funny one, I'm going to make jokes about everything. And then when I realized I had to go back and put myself in this situation, I felt so bad for younger me who was denied a lot of the help. But I was also grateful. I also remembered that it was, my mom and dad were the ones who encouraged us to make sure we were going and attending. We were always doing something. Like, they did not allow us to isolate ourselves. Like, when they saw that something that I was doing or that one of my sisters was doing, it wasn't okay. Like, yes, we didn't get the therapy that we needed, but they also made sure that we were never alone, that we were always with family or with friends. And that was something that I had to also remember as I was working on this. But when I found myself just stuck in those moments, I would take a break. I would read or watch like TikToks or reels from therapists, family therapists, and you know, um, I would be able to identify things and that they would say that I had experienced. That just being able to put a name to what you experienced is so
Mm.
helpful, so therapeutic. Knowing that you're not alone. Oh, this is like a phenomenon. Like, oh, this is something that other people go through. Oh, for some reason that sometimes just takes a whole weight off to know that I'm not abnormal. I'm not the only one going through this. So I was able to really unpack a lot while I was writing this. Alhamdulillah. It was a very I think for me, it was a really therapeutic book to write. Again, I felt like healing. I mentioned it, healing that younger Hudas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you also do touch on like getting married or marriage or getting married in well
Yeah,
for Huda in this book. It's not just about her parents' marriage, it's also about her interest that's like sort of peaking or coming through now in
like, how am I supposed to get married now? Like, and that was a real thing growing up. Like, people who knew that your parents were divorced, you like the number
mm,
of people who wanted to ask for you dwindled. Like, it was like you just didn't get a lot of
mm,
people who asked for you because, oh, that must be there's something wrong with your family. Now, as again, as an adult, like that doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? But like I guess like you're marrying the family. So if there's a problem in the family, I don't want any of that. That's a red flag. And that made Huda feel like even more like this scared and this urgency that she has now. I definitely have to get married, or I definitely have to find somebody who's going to talk to me. I have to get in front of this. Like that felt like that was her whole, like, I need to get in front of this before anything really hits the fan. I need to make sure I can, let me talk to him first. Right. And we see how that backfires splendidly at a
mm.
speed dating thing that she goes to. Oh man, that just cracked me up because that actually happened to me where I was like so
Oh
sure
my
that I was
gosh.
ready to get married. I was so sure that I was ready to get married. And I think it was this idea and this again sounds terrible, but this was a young Huda. And we don't date in Islam, but we do this like you can be chaperoned. So you can date with a chaperone who's like 5 steps behind you. You know what I mean? Like it's very old Jane Austen-esque kind of like, but so in the story, she goes to this speed dating thing, and in real life, I really thought like, oh, my parents messed up. I could probably do it better. Like their marriage crashed and burned. I bet mine's gonna be great. It was like really stupid competition that I had. I don't know why, and I'm like, I gotta show them that they have nothing to worry about. Ridiculous. But anyway, so in the story, she goes to a speed dating thing with her mom as a chaperone, and in real life, I also went to one where I don't know why my mom just kept bringing up the worst parts of me, and like the word like for some reason she kept telling them that we were haunted by jinn, and I'm looking at her like as she's talking, and the guys are like there's like one guy at a time, right? But the guy was just like, wait, what do you mean there's a jinn that lives in your house? I'm just like looking at my mom like, what are you doing? It was so bad, and that's when I was like, "You know what? I think I'm take a break. I'm not gonna this is not as important. Like, if that's how my mom is gonna be, let me take a break from trying to meet people." Like, this is just so funny. You know what? Maybe I don't think
Yeah.
I'll have a crush anymore on anyone, but yeah.
Yeah, I really that was I think my favorite scene in the book like that. Oh gosh, that backfired for Huda so badly. Some of the questions that her mother was asking and the way she was like, oh, she's very stubborn. She's very she's very highlighting all of
You've
your
had anger issues.
all
You've had
of
anger
her
issues. Are you good I was like,
highlighting all of
"Why?
her flaws.
Why are you telling them all of this on the first meeting? This is their first impression of me."
But Huda is in this book, she's like 15, 16, right? She's about 15, 16, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
pretty early. Yeah.
yeah, she's very young. But I really loved actually the fact that because what her mother says before that event is like, I might not think you're ready, but if you think you're ready, let's give this a go. And I think that was the awakening to her that was like, okay, maybe I'm not ready for this, which I thought was such a great way to do it, which is like, okay, you think you're ready, let's have a look. There are no harm in looking. Let's have a look, and then if you never know, it might work. But I think you're not ready, and it was such a mum winning that situation because I think Huda walked away like, oh my god, no, I'm not ready for this.
I think part of it was like if those are the first things that my mom has to say about me, then maybe I'm not like if that's her impression of me to share, then that maybe means that I'm not, yeah, then I have some things to work on as well. Like, I need her to really think of me as in a lot better way. I got to give her more material to work with than ghosts and anger problems. So it's like, maybe
Yeah,
I need to work on myself.
absolutely. Yeah. And also like just what one of the obviously we see Huda's best friend in this book as well. And it seems to be such an anchor for her. And she does at some point push her friend away while she's dealing with trying to process everything, and then eventually does come back to her. And it was such a it's like a tender exploration of friendship, and I am a huge proponent of friendship. I think friendship is amazing. Female friends are absolutely brilliant. um and but it's also, it's what we see is that Huda does not lean on her friend fully throughout it, because she needs to process so much of it by herself. And her friend was sensitive enough and sensible enough to give her the space that she needed, and to just be there when she was ready. And I think that is like the best of friendships, was when your friends have that realization, which is like, look, I'm here for you. You come to me when you need. I know you're going to come to me when you need me. And to have a little bit of sort of patience, and and like sympathy and kindness with that. But it's hard, I think, as a friend. You can feel so rejected when you're trying to be there for your friend and she's pushing you away.
And I've been through a lot of,
And you mentioned,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, something that you mentioned, that when you were a lot younger yourself, it was your friends that really helped you through some of the most difficult times. So what were you really? I mean, I think I know, but what were you really interested in bringing out about the importance of friendship?
No, yeah, because sometimes when your sisters are also experiencing, or my in the book, Huda's sisters are also experiencing, this trial, and it's hard to talk to each other because you understand, oh, they're going through something. Like, I don't want to burden them. And Huda has that same kind of, she feels almost like
Yeah.
she kind of lost that trust, or that bond kind of broke between her and her family, and so she's now more um, careful with who she's going to trust, or who she's going to open herself up to. And so she has her best friend, who she sees, the second she feels like her best friend isn't understanding her or seeing where she's coming from, she was like, oh, we're not, I'm done. Like, that's how you see me, a jerk,
Mm.
I'm done. And it's really this kind of you know, again, going back to like her isolating herself, but she sees that, oh, you don't even understand me. Like, my parents don't understand me. You're not understanding me. You're also leaving me. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go do my own thing. And at the same time, her friend doesn't know what quite to do. She does want to give her that space, but it's one of those situations of like, I too don't want to be rejected or abandoned. And so her friend is also kind of scared of like, and I think I've had a lot of unfortunate like friend breakups at this age, because we just were not at the same
Mm.
mental, we didn't have the words or the emotions or the maturity to be able to say we had a disagreement and come back together. And so I'm so grateful that they were able, like, this is again one of those healing moments, is that I did lose a couple of friends because I pushed them away, and I just didn't know how to get back together. And I was able to let her come back to her friend. And it was some of my biggest regrets was pushing away some of the people that I love the most. And then seeing
Mm.
that there is a way back. There is a way back to your friend. You're not too big to say I'm sorry. You're not too big to bring that, that friendship back. And that was something that I, again, hoped that I could express in the story, is that you can always go back to your friends. You have disagreements, you have arguments. It's scary to say I'm sorry. It's scary to open up, but you cannot isolate yourself, especially from your friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, Huda, it was such a pleasure speaking to you again today, and I loved talking about Huda F Wants to Know. Can you tell us quickly, like, what's next for Huda? Huda the character, but also Huda you. What's next?
So what's next for me? I do have another in the series coming up, which is what I'm working on right now. I don't know if the title has been announced, so I'm not sure if I can say it.
Okay.
But it takes place. Huda has graduated senior year, and she is
Ooh.
in the summer of her last summer, and she has one class to take at community college before she can transfer in the fall
Mm.
to university. So she's done her 2 years at community college because she took a bunch of like AP classes and stuff, and she meets a guy there. And so it's a kind of a romance, and all
Oh.
of Huda's Like she's the biggest, like at this point, she's such a romance junkie. She is a head over heels, full blown, like, I'm gonna have my love story. I'm gonna have a love match. I'm gonna meet him at college. He's going to sweep me off my feet. And this is also this summer where she begins to she's allowed to finally start going to the weddings with her mother. And so she's also got aunties that she's got to meet at all these weddings who are asking her, how old are you? Where are you from? What are you studying? And so she's like, "Oh, I'm the belle of the ball," and but of course she makes mistakes, and so we see her also find a found family on campus where you were talking about friendship, and she starts to now realize like can't be with like her sisters aren't always going to be there, and so she makes friends on campus with these girls, and so there's these storylines that kind of blend together, and it's really Huda trying to come it's like a self-love story almost, like she realizes she's putting all her emotion into finding somebody, but she's not putting that same emotion or energy into loving herself, like so she's starting to make some choices about like that are based on what her future spouse is going to love versus what she herself loves.
Sounds
But it's
amazing.
fun. It's really fun. So yeah, and then I have a couple other things in mind that I'm hoping will be announced soon. I can't wait to talk about them, and theirs are completely different than what I'm used to working on. So I can't wait. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll talk about that soon. But yeah, so just keep on working. I'm just working and having
Oh,
fun and dua for everybody that needs dua, for all the oppressed, for all those who are experiencing injustice. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. Excited for Ramadan as well.
yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yes, me too, me too. Well, this sounds absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to see, inshallah, what you'll be doing. But Huda, it was so wonderful speaking to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
It was such a good thank you.
I hope you loved listening to this episode and found things that will stay with you. I'd love to hear from you, so please do reach out on social media and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it can really help.